Good morning. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners to order for Tuesday, April 17th, 2018. And the first item on the agenda is adjustments to the agenda. Any adjustments to the agenda from the board? I see none, and I think we've got somebody coming in that wants to do public comment.
I think we may have one or two that were held up by jury folks. Maybe we can do public comment after.
Yeah, okay. So tell you for adjustments to the agenda, we'll move public comment behind item 5 to give the folks time to come in and get signed up. And we'll actually, let's just take item 5 next, and then we'll go to public comment after item 5. Because I think we got a bunch of people here for item 5, which is the county performance auditor. And we have Casey Creer, PhD here, and talk a little bit about County Day. So welcome, Casey.
Good morning, commissioners. Good to see everyone. And our sold out crowd for County Day. Anyway, so I'm here to present the second annual County Day. It was originally started by the wonderful Mrs. Shanda Miller, our previous performance auditor, to foster relationships with the county and the University of Oregon, specifically master's program students in the Planning, Public Policy, and Management Department. County Day seeks to shine a light on county processes for students of the program so that they have an idea as to what happens at the local government level beyond just municipal services. I was meeting with Steve, county administrator, and he said a couple of weeks ago, he said, and I'm paraphrasing, so if I misquote him, I'm sure he'll let me know. But he said, whereas a city is an inch wide and a mile deep, a county is an inch deep but a mile wide, just highlighting the broader range of services and the more dynamic functions of it in scope. Did I mess that up?
You got it.
Okay.
Nailed it.
Okay, just checking. So currently the county has one Planning, Public Policy, and Management Program student interning with the Department of Public Works. And then today we have a total of 12 so far. I've been told we're going to have up to 14 by the end of it. They'll be here. The other two will be here shortly. We have about 12 students participating in the second County Day. And so I wanted to actually acknowledge them so that the people can see them. I also wanted to make sure that these ducks acknowledge Mr. Steve Dingle, who is our county counsel and an Oregon State University alumnus. So make sure you send him plenty of love from wherever he is. And then while I'm actually speaking before you, I want to actually clarify, I am not actually spearheading this County Day. Miss Laura Vinson, the county's recruitment and selection coordinator, and Mrs. Mo Young, the county's equity and access coordinator, and Mr. Ben Clark, the University of Oregon's assistant professor in the 3 p.m. program, have served as guiding lights to actually ensure that this County Day happens as best as possible and to make sure that Lane County is represented well. So I want to make sure I give credit where credit is due. Also, we have Julie Volker Morris. Okay, I didn't want to mess that up, who is with Career Services, who's also attending and making sure that the students and participants have a broad overview and a good sense of what a career in county government looks like. Basically, the students have been brought to this meeting in particular to get a sense of how county commissioners carry out their business, make decisions, along with hearing from citizens or any other interested third parties. As far as their actual agenda, so far we've had the obvious check-in, but we have had introductions. We've gone over a bit of county structure. What we have left at this point, they're going to have 3 tours, including a tour of the actual public service building, a tour of the Health and Human Services area, and then where's the last one? What is the last tour? Oh, technology services right after the public service building. Then they're going to have 10 other presentations, some of which are going to include public works, public safety, assessment, taxation, community economic development, and then the health and human services. So then they'll finish off the day, cap it off with a presentation from Christine Moody, the budget manager, and then, of course, our county administrator, Steve Mucker-Heisky. Although I will humbly request, in jest, that the students refer to Mr. Mucker-Heisky, since he's from Wisconsin, as the Big Cheese, considering, the position and everything else. So, that being said, County Day is underway.
A first.
It makes sense, considering admin in Wisconsin fits. I don't actually know.
Actual cheese maker in the room, though. So.
Hey, you don't make cheese?
I don't make cheese.
Okay. You do like cheese?
I like cheese.
Okay.
Who doesn't like cheese?
Close enough.
Fried.
Oh my gosh, with the jalapeno poppers. Anyway, so County Day is here. It's the second. Hopefully, there will be third, fourth, fifth, as we continue to grow a relationship with the county and the University of Oregon to hopefully bring in and recruit many different students with great skill sets. All these are master's students who are fully capable and qualified and have shown an interest in the areas that they are concerned about as far as how they can affect change and for a positive direction. And I know the county administrator and his staff have overseen this new strategic plan that has been in place, so I know that they'd be curious to hear about that. And I know that you commissioners are interested in recruiting and retaining quality employees that can be a magnificent benefit towards how the county operates. So that being said, if you have any actual specific questions, I will have Ms. Vincent and Mrs. Young come up for anything related to the actual process of the day. Other than that, if there are questions or if the administrator wants to say something, if y'all have something, the floor is yours.
I'll just thank you, Casey, for the great overview. This is the second year that we've done this County Day, and it's one of several things that we're doing to build a stronger partnership with the University of Oregon. We've recognized that we have this incredible asset just down the street, within walking distance from so many of our services, and it's really for Lane County, I think, been an untapped resource. So we've developed a internship program and had, I think, around 13 individuals, most of whom have been University of Oregon students or former students who've interned with us in paid internship programs. We've hired 3 of those people to full-time jobs in Lane County. We will be in, and I'll give you a little preview of our budget message that you'll get later next week, informally on May 1st, but we'll be launching, and we've launched the pilot program as part of our new policy lab, a partnership with the 3 p.m. program at the University of Oregon, and they're already doing some work. The students and faculty are at evaluating both our use of part-time employees in the organization as well as analyzing gender equity, particularly gender equity as it relates to compensation of our employees. So we're looking at that as being the start of a long-standing formal relationship with the university and the 3 p.m. program in particular, to help us analyze policies before they're instituted and then track and report on them after they're instituted to determine the success, the viability of a potential policy and the success of a policy that's implemented. So we're really excited about that. And this is just, it's really, I'd credit Professor Clark, who's here from the university side, of really helping to drive a lot of this partnership, and then a number of folks on our side, Greg Rickoff and Laura Vincent and Mo Young and others who really have participated in that. And I don't know, Professor Clark, if you wanted to say anything or introduce any of the folks here. I don't want to put you on the spot if you're not prepared to do that, but certainly if the board has questions more about this program and some of our partnerships, we'd be happy to entertain those.
Well, thank you all for hosting us here today. Really appreciate the opportunity to show the students what local government's all about. As somebody who studies local government and has worked in local government, I think it's a great opportunity in a career to really have an impact on the lives of the people that you're trying to serve. And I'm really excited about the opportunity that we have in 3 p.m. Forming a partnership with Lane County. to strengthen human capital within your organization and build that human capital in our side as well with real-world problems solving. So thanks for the opportunity and thanks for your time. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Sorensen.
Well, I just wanted to thank all of you for coming, not only today, but for your interest in Lane County government and county government in general and local government even beyond that. I think it's really important to have the partnership between the county and the University of Oregon. We're not really all that far apart in terms of mileage. In fact, a lot of university students live west of downtown Eugene, so they actually pass through our our courthouse area on their way to and from. I think that you should realize that there's quite a bit of competition in the arena of local governments and the cooperation with colleges and universities. We have a pretty strong relationship with Oregon State University because of our extension relationship, and most counties in the United States have a strong relationship with their state land-grant university, so we fit that mode also. And in the case of Portland State University, we have a fairly long-standing, I guess 5 years or so, a relationship with Portland State to provide assistance to us in the development of our strategic plan. So we have a lot going right now with a lot of people, and you know, I really appreciate the leadership of Mr. Milkohysky as our county administrator to build a strong relationship with the University of Oregon, and also something that those other schools can't really do that we can in our relationship with the U of O. We can provide a lot more hands-on experiences for students. It's just more practical because of the proximity of our county seat here in Eugene, but really also all of our services throughout the county and the proximity to University of Oregon students and faculty. And I think it's important that on our end that we get a good bang for the buck and that the students are able to materially add to what we're doing around here. But similarly, I think the educational component is also something that we need to really make sure that that occurs and make sure that students learn more about, as you mentioned, the problems and the problem solving that goes on here. And anyway, I think it's great that you're having this program, and leadership here at the county is the main reason that we're able to do this. And thank you very much, and have a great day.
Commissioner Farr.
Very briefly, it's really impressive that you all showed up today. I've had a chance to speak in your classes, and I'm always amazed by the level of the questions that are asked that are fired in my direction. A significant thing that I wanted to say is in 1973, 15 minutes after I arrived on the University of Oregon campus for my freshman year, I met my wife outside of Villard Hall. She was singing outside of University Theater, and that was a long time ago, so I always carry a U of O pen with me, so go Ducks. Thanks for being here this morning, and I'm looking back at Ms. Gaffney, who's the director of our Health and Human Services Department, who came through the, was it the 3 p.m. program that you came through?
Yes.
And now is the director of Health and Human Services for Lane County, a very significant amount of work that goes through that department. Thanks for being here. Thanks for considering Lane County for internship, and I hope to see you walking the halls.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Doctor, great presentation. Thank you for that. And I congratulate you who are looking at public service as a career. I've spent 20 years in public service. It is the highlight of my life. There's nothing more rewarding personally and satisfactorily as being involved in public service, helping those people that entrust you to your jobs and your career. And thank you for moving in that direction, and I wish you the best of luck.
Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I can't really say much more than that, but as somebody who did spend a little time in Texas, I need you to understand something. There's humor, and then there's Texas humor. So if you're going to hang around with Dr. Creer at all, read up on Texas humor, and you will totally get there with him. So we've had some great chats already about, of course, I didn't spend near the time in Texas that Dr. Creer did, but if you spend a week there, it can do some pretty much changing of attitudes. But and also, Professor, please tell me your next stop is not a sausage maker. Because I'd be scared then. So, because there's that old saying that government and sauce making a sausage, they all kind of look the same. So, but not really. I just want to echo the statements already made, and congratulations. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. And I think you're going to learn quite a bit. Commissioner Williams and I both spent time as mayors and of our respective communities, and as a servant in the county, you'll find there's such a difference between city and county government. And county government is probably one of the most complex forms of government you'll find. And but yet it's one of the most rewarding. So I thank you for being here, and really greatly appreciate it. And have a great time. Thanks.
So I'll just want to say welcome and thank you for your interest in being in public service. I think what you're seeing is one of the ways Lane County has been able to move ahead, and that's been establishing a lot of partnerships and working collaboratively. And this partnership we're developing with the U of O is just one of those ways we're extending our limited resources and being able to do a lot with a little here in Lane County. And that partnership with the U of O is stretched to where we're helping advocate for their bond measures for the night campus and getting that done, to where our public health department's working with the health department on the university campus on various issues that face students and faculty there relative to their health. So it moves up and down the spectrum of how this partnership is. And this particular partnership with the 3 PM program is really important to us because we need to recruit and retain really high quality employees. It's part of our values to have that high quality employees, and you guys are a great source of those employees, and we're looking forward to you learning a little bit more about the county today. Kind of sad that you don't have a tour of the jail on your schedule. Because that one, but you know, Sheriff Trapp's really good about doing tours, so if you want to come back and do one, I'm sure he'd be happy to take you on a tour. He does that for people. And I'm sure if individually you guys are interested, some of the commissioners here and some other employees, if you want to do a follow along for the day, contact us. I'm willing to, if you're willing to be dragged all over Lane County for a day and follow me through West Lane County, which is the size of the state of Rhode Island, because sometimes I start out in Junction City and end up in Florence. It's pretty big variety we deal with here, and like Casey and quoting Steve said, a mile wide and an inch deep. I think we're more than an inch deep though, because a lot of the services we provide go really deep when you start thinking about what we do with our federally qualified health clinics and just the wraparound care we provide for very vulnerable populations of low-income people. That's a pretty deep service. And then on the other side, we're paving roads. Yes. So it is a mile wide. But I think even in that mile wide, I don't like it being described as an inch deep because we really go very deep in all those services. So
we collect taxes too.
Yeah, we do it all. So if there's something you're interested in, and I tell you, I never know what I'm going to do in a single day because my day can change with a phone call from a constituent. And one of my favorite stories is my first couple phone calls. One was about wild cows and another one was about a lonely turkey. So you never know what you're going to get. So welcome to local government, and thank you for being here today.
So with that, we will stay as long as we can, and after that we will be beginning a tour of the public service building. So thank you, commissioners, Mr. Administrator, and have a good meeting.
Thank you. And thank all of you. So with that, we are going to move on to public comment. And if Devin will bring me the sign-up sheet. I think we got a couple people that were delayed through all the jury folks that were out there. Must be seating a big jury today. So we have David Tvet signed up, and that's all I have today.
My name is David Tveit, and I live in unincorporated Lane County in the River Road area. This being National Tax Day, I think it's appropriate to bring up more local tax issues also, and how you, our county commissioners, have hugely failed us on this issue. I want to read some passages on this issue written by local forester Roy Keane in 2017. In 1999, Kitzhaber signed HB 3575 into law. This bill let large private forest owners, 5,000 acres or more, off the hook on timber harvest privilege taxes. These taxes originally went to K-12 education. The annual loss from this unearned subsidy is ironically around $60 million a year. Were this privilege tax still collected, it would double or replace 2017's meager school fund release. The 1999 rescinding of this harvest privilege tax has to date lost Oregon about $1 billion in potential revenue. Had this tax been collected over the last 18 years instead of canceled, it would have easily covered the reported $600 million school fund shortfall. Tax reformers seeking to increase taxes should start by reading the Oregon's 2017 to 19 tax expenditure report. This report itemizes billions of dollars in continuing tax subsidies granted to privileged individuals and institutions. Before our leaders seek to sell public forests or log more public timber to fund schools and services, they should also read this report. The funds they seek are here. Among the billions of dollars listed in tax subsidies, there are other large timber tax subsidies that are never mentioned by county commissioners, including you, or legislators. Until 1978, timber taxes, real property in Oregon, was taxed annually, pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into general funds every year. In 1978, Oregon's legislature decided to treat standing timber as a crop for taxation purposes, a crop to be supposedly taxed at harvest. A succession of biennial expenditure reports imply that about $15 billion in real property taxes have been lost since privately owned standing timber was exempted in 1978. This year's potential property tax loss on the standing timber exemption is about $250 million, with about $45 million in property taxes shifted to less privileged property owners. You county commissioners are clearly not doing your job of protecting Lane County taxpayers, and instead are going along with the state legislature and the timber industry scam on us for Oregon, in Oregon, that is for mostly their private financial gain. They create near minimal jobs, around 2% of the Oregon economy now, and only 3 to 7% of the Lane County economy, depending on how you figure it. You three up for re-election have gotten large political contributions from the timber and development interests, and you clearly have shown your betrayal of Lane County citizens who you claim to represent while you support your timber industry and development supporters.
Thank you. That's the only person I had signed up for public comment today. David, did you want to address us today, or? Yeah, did you want to address us today, or? I didn't see you signed up.
Yeah, I think that...
you want to state your name first?
Dave Piccioni, and I pretty much agree with what David Tvet was saying. If they were going to do the horrible destruction of our forests, we should at least get a lot of money out of it for our common uses. And giving the forest companies a pass is not a way to respect the citizens of a county or yourselves, I think. But I don't know. So I didn't come here. I didn't intend to speak today, so I'm not real I just think you should, if you are going to cut the trees, get some money for all of us. And also, one thing I remember, sometimes when they cut a parcel of land, they're obligated to leave a couple of trees, and they should just leave half the trees, not just two old little trees that aren't going to do much. You know, I don't know. But what I think it would be good if we one time had a thing where we say something and you respond, and then you say something and whoever's here can respond, kind of like a dialogue, because you guys talk to us and then we talk to you, but there's no feeling of connection because it's not done at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So that's everyone I have signed up for public comment today. With that, I'll close public comment. We'll move on to Commissioner's response to public comments and or other issues and remonstrance. Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much for the public comment today. I think for the benefit of our visitors, I'll point out this is a common kind of scenario where local governments like cities and counties provide an opportunity for citizens to come in and give their public comment on issues. And this is common throughout Oregon, not so common outside of Oregon, but fairly common in Oregon, that cities and counties will open their meetings with public comment from the public and let the public say pretty much anything they want to say. We do tend to limit personnel issues and other issues that are taken up in our executive session. But generally, any international, national, state, or government, or even non-government issues can be brought up in the public comment. And so sometimes when people watch the public comment, they go, what is the state taxation of timber got to do with Lane County government? Well, the answer is that Lane County government itself is a lobbying organization. We have a staff of people that we employ in Washington, D.C., and to help us with our Salem lobbying. And so we are involved. In fact, later today on our agenda, there's a series of legislative proposals that are on our agenda. So commenters come in, they make proposals about state legislation and what the county should or should not be doing on the state legislation. But oftentimes we don't have a lot of control. And two of our board members, Commissioner Farr and myself, have been state legislators, and so we got it the other way around in Salem. Why don't you get these local governments to do this? Why don't you get the federal government to do this? So there's often with our system of interlocking governments of federal, state, local, administrative, judicial, and executive or legislative, there's all these 6 to the 6th power of relationships going on all the time. It's hard sometimes for the public to sort it out, and sometimes it's hard for the participants to sort it out as to who has control of an issue, like what's the state's involvement in immigration? Well, the Constitution says the federal government's immigration. So it's very confusing to many people, and often to the governments themselves as to what their role is. And having said that, I do agree with the public comment that the state timber taxation has resulted in a drop in revenue. I'm not sure I'm an expert on whether it should be the ad valorem tax rate or the harvest tax rate or a mixture of the two for it to be fair. But the amount of money that we're collecting from the timber industry is lower than it used to be.
Any other remonstrance? Commissioner Farr.
This is just an item that I talk about frequently, the urban transition. We continue to have issues in the urban transition that cause difficulties on a regular basis for the people who live there. The urban transition is where people live in an urbanized area inside the urban growth boundary, but outside of the city limits. So they don't receive city services. They receive county services. And really, last night and yesterday, I had the chance to meet at length with with a number of people regarding services in the county, and Cahoots is saying that they would wish to extend their services throughout the county. And we talk about public safety, we talk about land use and parking, but significantly, what we're doing is last October we kicked off the River Road Santa Clara neighborhood revision plan. That's not the actual name of it, but over 400 people showed up last October, and the work continues. Starting on June 5th, we'll be bringing people back together to talk about how do we handle the urban transition, how do we handle the conflict of types of services between that very thin line where on one side you live in the city, on one side you live in the county, even though you both do the same things. You both get up in the morning, you go to work, you get in your car, you go through parking, you go through traffic, really live the same lifestyle and live the same lives but have a very different level of service. So leveling out that the type of services that people in the county receive inside the urban growth boundary with what the services that people in the city receive inside the city limits. Leveling that out is something that, Mr. Mokrajski, you've done a great job of really paying close attention to that. Mr. Rickoff is paying close attention to that. And I think we're moving forward pretty well. I'm pleased to see Lane County staff deeply involved in the process, and I'm looking forward to a strong outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other remonstrance? Seeing none, then we'll move on to emergency business. Is there any emergency business today?
No, we have none.
Then that brings us to our consent calendar, which is items that are considered to be routine by the Board of Commissioners and will be enacted in one motion in the form listed. And there will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion was desired, the item would have been removed from the consent calendar under our adjustments to the agenda. And if you want details on each of these items, you can go to our agenda online and click on view material for each various item we're approving under the consent calendar. Do I have a motion for the consent calendar today? Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Lyken, seconded by Commissioner Williams. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So that brings us to item 7, which is Health and Human Services, first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing on ordinance number 1803 in a matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 9 to update environmental and other public health provisions 9.500 through 9.562 and 9.566 through 9.685. And we have Karen Gaffney, our Director of Health and Human Services. Welcome, Karen.
Morning, Chair Bozovich and Commissioners. It was quite a long title. It gave me plenty of time to walk out from the back of the room. Today is just first reading, so I haven't prepared a staff presentation. If we schedule the second reading and public hearing, we'll certainly be prepared to bring you back a full presentation. This item has actually been in the works for quite some time in our effort to update the language in Lane Code to reflect both our current practice and the current state rules and statutes regarding public health and environmental health. So this item essentially works to update terminology, redefine responsibility for permits and certificate issuance, and also changes our reference to statute and OAR so that as those that state level regulation changes, then our code stays up to date with that. So that's essentially what this item seeks to accomplish.
Any questions for Ms. Gaffney? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve.
Actually, Chair,
go ahead.
Just not a question, but I'd like to thank you for the board packet that you did provide. It's a 28-page document which covers the changes that have been prescribed. So anyone watching online or on live right now can access actually the changes that we'll be talking about when we go to the second reading. Thank you, Ms. Gaffney.
So, and real quick, what was the date you wanted to have this public hearing and time, or do we need a time certain on that?
At May 1st.
May 1st, at this point, we're not requesting a time certain in the packet. Typically, the Board of Health meets first in the day, but we haven't requested a specific time certain.
I just wanted to make sure whoever makes a motion knew exactly what we're looking for in the public hearing.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Farr.
We're looking at this as as a Board of County Commissioners right now, the first reading. Will the second reading and deliberation be as a Board of Health?
Chair Bozovich, we've gone back and forth on that item. At this point, we've presented this as a Board of Commissioners because Lane Code is typically adopted by the Board of Commissioners, and staff didn't feel it was important for the Board of Health to take that action. So certainly if you would like to convene jointly as both, we can do that for the second reading. But at this point, our analysis with County Council was that the Board of Commissioners was sufficient to take this action.
Thank you for that clarification, Ms. Gaffney. I'll trust yours and the chair's decision-making on that.
Yep. So I've got the voice from above, Diana, texting me saying 10:30 was what we had put in the packet for time certain, and it's definitively a board action because of being Lane Code. So 10:30 time certain on the motion. So any other questions for staff on this? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the first reading and set the second reading. Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to move approval of the first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing of Ordinance 1803 in the matter of amending Lane County Code Chapter 9 to update environmental and other public health provisions for May 1st, 2018 at 10:30 a.m. in Harris Hall.
Second.
Been moved by Commissioner Lykin, seconded by Commissioner Williams. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. So we'll move on to item 8A, which is County Administration announcements. Mr. Mokahiski.
Just wanted to share with the board on Friday afternoon, had an opportunity to meet with the emerging leaders class of Lane County from last year that graduated. It was 21 individuals who graduated from our first emerging leaders cohort. As the board knows, this is a program that we've put together that we're doing a couple times a year to provide training and development opportunities for individuals who are not currently in supervisory roles but are interested in leadership and professional development. So we had 21 individuals who went through that program last year. We have another 21 individuals who are currently going through the second cohort, and it just has been an incredibly successful program to date. The individuals who've gone through have contributed great things, are really engaged. I'd say that the folks who are going through these programs are representation of our actively engaged employees, people who not only are doing a great job in their day-to-day work, but are really interested in the community, interested in the organization, they're interested in their own professional career development, and really what we've tried to do is capture that interest and provide opportunities for those individuals to continue to grow. So after the program's over, what we want to do is make sure that they don't just go through a 6-week-long program and then that's it. So we've committed to having regular, several times a year, sort of update meetings with those individuals. The graduates from that program all get invited to our annual leadership summit, which is a summit that we've done for 2 years in a row, and we will do every December for all of our supervisors, managers, directors throughout the organization. So it really was just a great opportunity to connect with those individuals late on a Friday afternoon to talk about our new strategic plan, to talk about our budget process and initiatives and what we've tried to do to get our own house in order here over the last several years. And I wanted to, so I want to thank those individuals for their continued commitment and participation in our organization. And I wanted to just reflect on stories that have come out in the Register Guard recently about PERS recipients, and you saw the story maybe over the weekend about the top 10 PERS recipients in the state. An editorial in the Register Guard today about that, which I thought, as the editorial board, in my opinion, typically does related to particularly PERS issues, is very thoughtful and thorough in its overview of the challenges with the state pension system. But I thought one of the interesting comments in that editorial today was a reflection on the fact that, this is a systemic problem. The benefits that have been provided for particularly Tier 1 employees are vested property rights. Those can't be changed for individuals. In many ways, it's hard to blame the individuals who are receiving those benefits because those are benefits that have been provided there. But the reality of the system is that most of the individuals, and a growing number of the individuals who are employees of our organization and of other local and public organizations around the state, are the third tier. They're OPSERP employees who do not receive those Tier 1 benefits, and those are the individuals who are having to deal with the heavy workloads from reduced funding for services, as well as the perception of government employees because of headlines around large pensions that a handful of employees are receiving. And so I just wanted to call that out and reflect on the fact that we continue to face a challenge with growing benefit costs for particularly in the areas of health insurance and pension costs. For our part here in Lane County, we will be proposing a significant PERS initiative as part of our proposed budget in a couple weeks, and so we'll talk more about that when that comes forward. But we're trying to do what we can do within our control to manage those expenses, and I just want to recognize that we have great employees in our organization who are contributing great things to the community. We've said that our purpose in Lane County is to improve lives. That's why we're here. We do a lot of things to that end, but our purpose, the reason that all of us get up every morning and come and work for this organization, is to improve lives in our community. And the three things that we recognize that make our employees in Lane County excellent are their passion to serve, their drive to connect, and their focus on solutions. Those are three things: service, connection, and solutions are the things that make our employees great, and we will continue that. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of a reflection on those issues there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for the administrator? So our next item has been advertised for 10 o'clock time certain, so I'd like to maybe bring Alex Kyler up and see if we can maybe get through some of the report back on the 2018 Legislative Assembly before the 10 o'clock, and then we'll probably have to bring you back after that to do the updating the priorities. So.
Very good. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Alex Kyler, your Intergovernmental Relations Manager. I do have a report back on the 2018 legislature, as well as what it sounds like it may come back for is updating priorities for the next session. You do have a packet in front of you, and I think the pertinent discussion point ought to be to turn to attachment A, which has this should look somewhat familiar to you. What this document represents the suite of recommendations that the board took prior to the legislative session in 2018, which directed me to work on specific items up in Salem. And then I've amended this document, just as I did after the last session, with a similar document to suggest, if you look at the items in bold that's italicized, that's the sort of the report back of what happened to the particular bills. So there's a couple that I wanted to bring to your attention on this document. The first one was actually House Bill 4069. This was a measure that the county Lane County did do quite a bit of work on in terms of initiating and lobbying during the session. We sort of had a mixed result with this measure. The introduced version did not pass, but we were successful late in the session of gaining some budget report language, and that I copied from the budget report for House Bill 5201, and you can see what it says. And it's sort of interesting in that this was the bill that the introduced bill attempted to true up video lottery for economic development. What's happened in past sessions is the legislature late in the session in the Ways and Means Committee has said, notwithstanding a certain statute, the statute that directs 2.5% of video lottery to counties, they've put a fixed dollar amount in there. And over the past several biennia, that's gone both ways for counties. Sometimes we've gotten a little bit more money out of the legislature, but by and large, we've gotten less. And so what we were trying to do was to put into statute a true-up mechanism that the legislature would follow. So we, like I said, we got the budget report language in a budget bill, which is only good for the biennium, but if you read the budget report language, you sort of get the sense that perhaps it's going to go beyond the next biennium. So we're going to wait and see. I think the ultimate approach for us is to wait and see if we need to sort of work on some sort of statutory change for next session. But by and large, I think we got a win, certainly for this biennium with respect to the true-up issue. The next bill I'd like to bring your attention to is on the second page of this report, House Bill 4034. This was a measure that we were pretty interested in because of it had language about the creation of accessory dwelling units in unincorporated parts of the county. That measure did not pass, and but what did happen was the language in that bill got amended into House Bill 4031. And the reason I bring up House Bill 4031 was that late in the session, if you recall, we had an issue with a certain brewery, Agrarian Ales, up in the northern part of the county. And they have had some land use issues up there. We really tried very hard to get an amendment late in the session into 4031 to try to address that issue. And ultimately, we just ran out of time. I mean, it really was getting towards the last day of session that we started to work on that issue, and we simply ran out of time. But it was what we attempted to do, and when we get to the discussion about legislative priorities and principles for next session, I can speak more to that particular issue.
Mr. Chair, I'll have something to say about that later. Okay. Let's continue right now.
I also wanted to bring to your attention on page 3, House Bill 4086 relating to building codes. This was a bill that, as introduced, we thought we could support, and it ultimately did not pass. It is gotten quite a bit of interest, particularly among cities, because of a Department of Justice and a legislative council opinion that suggests that our delegation, a local government's delegation, of its building code operations to a third-party company, a private firm, which manages for us, for example, some building inspection and some plan review and sort of acts as a building official, is illegal. That's what the DOJ thinks, and that's what the agency thinks, the state agency that manages building codes, and that's what Legislative Council thinks. On the other hand, local governments do not believe that, and they're sort of nervous of that sort of discussion being considered to be law with respect to other things that we might contract out. So we are watching this pretty closely, as in particular our cities. There's discussion that there are a couple cities that have to be recertified every 4 years for their building codes, and that in Lane County there may be 1 or 2 cities that are not recertified. We think that will probably trigger a lawsuit that it is very likely that the League of Oregon Cities will jump into, and potentially the Association of Oregon Counties, to try to sort of monitor how the courts view these opinions about the delegation of authority. So certainly something that really bears watching, and again, the cities are quite interested in this topic. On the next page, the bill I wanted to bring to your attention is House Bill 4097 relating to legal resources. This was a bill that did pass, and the reason I wanted to bring it up to you is that we do operate a law library. This had to do with law libraries and the ability to change a little bit of their service delivery to be more functional for the courts. It's just remarkable to me that anytime law libraries get discussed in Salem, it's not an easy conversation. And I think I can leave it at that. And also, again, when we get to legislative priorities for next session, I'll return to the issue of law libraries. So moving on to the next set of bills, which are the Senate bills, there's a couple that I wanted to bring to your attention in particular. First one being on the second page of the Senate bills, Senate Bill 1555, relating to the Oregon marijuana account. This bill did ultimately pass, and I just wanted to bring to your attention, I think I've made a slight mistake in that last sentence of my report back where I say the measure required a 3/5 majority. And that's inaccurate. It did not require a 3/5 majority. It only required a simple majority, and it did fail upon its initial consideration because it didn't gain a simple majority. So while there were votes in the majority to pass it, it was not a majority of the members present. And so it was sort of an interesting piece of legislative action and was tabled for reconsideration the next day and ultimately did pass. Next one is immediately under that, Senate Bill 1556 relating to trust deeds. This was a measure that I spent probably pretty much every day of the session on. It has to do with our participation. We are one of 12 counties that are acting as plaintiffs against the Mortgage Electronic Registry System, the MERS lawsuit. And this measure would have essentially eliminated our ability to participate and continue in that lawsuit along with the 11 other counties that we've joined with. We've seen this kind of bill before. This session, it was much more difficult, and it did stay alive throughout the entirety of the session, literally until about 2 o'clock on the closing day of session. So we think that we will probably see another attempt at limiting counties' ability to bring suit against the Mortgage Electronic Registry System in 2019. The banking industry is really trying very hard to get this done, and a very complex issue. And it really gets to the heart of a county service that we provide, which is a recording of trust deeds. And I can speak a little bit more to that in the when we get to this section about 2019. The last issue that I wanted to bring to your attention in terms of policy measures, Senate Bill 1566 relating to the employer contribution to PERS. This was a bill we recommended to support, and Administrator Mokrahysky spoke a little bit earlier to you about the PERS issues. This is a really kind of neat little bill that does give local governments a tool to minimize or to help pay for the employer contribution to PERS by setting up a side account. It's got a couple of different caps. I think you will hear about this more during the budget deliberations, but we are, I think it was a very constructive piece of legislation with respect to assisting local governments with their future PERS liabilities. If I can, Mr. Chair, I'm going to just jump into a little bit. I've got one more document, attachment B, that has to do with budget bills. I think I can do this in 5 minutes. There were several at the Legislative Committee that I brought back that I thought were important to highlight for staff. Senate Bill, the first one is Senate Bill 1544 relating to marijuana. This one creates a new program that will be managed by the Public Safety Coordinating Council. Excuse me, the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission. I think applications actually have to come through the PSCC for a new grant program. It's pretty specific grant program that that has to do with the illegal cultivation and distribution of marijuana, and it can only be used for law enforcement and prosecutorial services. There's only a little bit of money that got appropriated towards this, $1.5 million, and there's a rulemaking that's being undertaken. I think this is worthy to watch because we hope that this program could in the future be expanded into some of the more nuisance-related issues that, in particular, Lane County has faced. But this is at least a start to try to plow some money towards local government impacts of recreational marijuana in Oregon. The other one that I wanted to bring to your attention is on the last page of this document, which is House Bill 5201. This was sort of the Christmas tree bill for the short session, and there's a couple things in there that I wanted to highlight. The third bullet down shows, just because I thought it was interesting, the costs associated with the 2017 fire season. This was sort of putting the fire season to bed, if you will, through the legislature. And you can see that, normally when you look at firefighting costs, you're looking directly at the Board of Forestry, but I thought it was interesting that there's a number of other agencies that also got involved, and you can see some of the expenses that, for example, the Department of State Police, Department of Public Safety Services and Training, and the Military Department all had expenses relating to the fire season that were not insignificant. The other thing on the fourth bullet, we were actually able to be named in this bill for some winter emergency housing services. We got $500,000 out of this bill, which was a real win, and I think got to recognize Commissioner Farr's role and Mayor of Eugene, Lucy Vinnis, both did really good work in sort of setting the stage for making sure that we were included in a list of counties that were to receive dollars under this particular earmark. There were nine individual named entities that got money. So
let me point out, I did nothing.
Well, you did something. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that we did get, counties do get a reimbursement for Measure 101 special election costs through this bill. There was another earmark that I'm not all that familiar with, but I thought it was worthy to bring to your attention, is $350,000 for continued operation up at Leeburg Fish Hatchery. There's a good item there of $400,000 for increased mental health and crisis intervention training. That's been a successful program up at DPSST. So those are, I think that concludes what we discussed, at least with respect to the short session at Legislative Committee, and I'm happy to return after your time certain is done.
So got about 3 minutes for a quick question. Go ahead, Commissioner.
I'm interested in Senate Bill 1507, the climate change legislation. Where is that now?
Chairman Bozovich and Commissioner Sorensen. So there were two climate change bills. It had a companion measure in House Bill 4001. So both bills advanced for a while, and there was definitely some attempts to continue to breathe life into that issue. Ultimately, they both died. I think the popular discussion is that they will return in 2019, and I will bring to your attention. Oh, on that, in the budget report, in attachment B, about halfway down on the Christmas tree bill, maybe a third down, there's a bullet there of $1.4 million to the Department of Administrative Services for a carbon policy office, which is housed in the office of the governor. So in spite of not being able to get policy language through the legislature, there was a fair amount of money that got earmarked for some staff people, which will be housed in the governor's office. And it's my understanding that those folks will continue to work on policy development in advance of the 19 session.
And so that will be funded in the governor's office between, say, now and through this 19th session.
Exactly.
Do you know what they're doing?
No. In fact, it was a fairly interesting little piece of, legislative history when this thing popped up, and the Republican minority leader from the House had some real pointed questions for how this came about, and wondering if there had been any testimony on this item? No. Any written material on this item? No. Any discussion whatsoever on this item? And at that point in time, the Senate president weighed in and sort of attempted to, there was no governor's office staff in the room. It was kind of an awkward moment, and the Senate president weighed in and sort of managed his way through that moment. But I think this was actually a pretty highly controversial chunk of funding.
So the advocates weren't able to get the policy change, but they were able to get the $1.4 million in the Christmas tree bill.
Yeah.
Now, is this legislative report on the agenda? It says also some action. What action are you recommending besides
after the time certain?
That will be the
that'll be
in advance of the next session.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, we're splitting Alex's time here.
Yeah, okay.
Time certain at 10 o'clock.
Okay, so do we have more time, or are we behind time?
We're behind now.
Okay, I'll leave my questions till later. Thanks.
Thank you. So we'll come back to item C here in a few minutes. We'll go back to 8B, which is discussion updates on the implementation of the resource management plans for Western Oregon, as well as on the local projects and planning efforts. And I think we've got a whole bunch of folks from BLM here if you want to come up and take a seat at the table. I don't know if you guys have a PowerPoint or anything like that. Nope.
We do have a packet of information.
Okay, good. I was going to say somebody can help you get it loaded if you need it, but
Thank you.
don't have to wait for this to load.
No, you can take it with you too.
Yeah. So if you all want to introduce yourselves and go ahead and get started.
I'm Jose Linares. I'm the district manager for the Northwest Oregon District of the BLM.
I'm David Howell. I'm the associate district manager for the Northwest Oregon District.
And I'm Jennifer Velez. I'm the public affairs officer for Northwest Oregon District.
And thank you for having us today. I basically just wanted to stop by and introduce myself, provide a few updates, and just answer any questions that the commissioners might have. I've been on the district for about a year now. Prior to that, I was with the Forest Service up in the regional office in a variety of roles, including the Director of Natural Resources and the Director of Engineering. And before that, I was a forest supervisor in the Sayus and before that, I was with the BLM in Salem. So I've been in the area for many years. I actually grew up in this area and very familiar with the communities and the natural resource issues. The Northwest Oregon District's a relatively new district. It was formed about 18 months ago through consolidating what was previously the Eugene District and the Salem District. It's a large district. It extends essentially from about Cottage Grove on the south end up to the Columbia River and from the coast to the Cascades. And so it includes all the BLM lands within that geographic area. It's a large, complex district. We encompasses, or we touch about 14 counties. It includes about 75% of the population of the state of Oregon. And because it is a large geographic area, we have some significant programs. We have once we're up to full implementation of the new RMP, we'll have the largest timber program of essentially any federal unit in the United States, including BLM or Forest Service. We have a very active aquatic restoration program with projects, throughout the district, both in the Cascades and the Coast Range. And because we do have such a population base here, we have a significant recreation program with variety of recreation sites, including campgrounds, day use areas, hiking trails, ATV trails, some world-class mountain bike trails, and we also manage the Yaquina Head Lighthouse on the coast, and even a disc golf course here in Eugene at the West Eugene Wetlands. So just a variety of different recreation opportunities. And a lot of that information is in your packet. There is a map of the district along with some facts about the district. There's an update from last November that provides some specific information on ongoing projects in the district, and we're in the process of updating that now, and we'll be sure that you get a more current one here in the next month or so. It should be out. A little bit about the timber program is under the new resource management plan, our target will be, once we get to full implementation, will be 150 million board feet a year. Last year, our target was 105 million board feet, and we did exceed that. I think we actually did about 109 million. This year, our target's 112, and we're on track to either meet or exceed that. This is a challenging year for us with respect to the timber program because it's the last year of a 2-year transition period between the old resource management plan and the new resource management plan. So this is the last year that we can actually sell any sales that were prepared under the old resource management plan. So we're in the process of trying to be sure that we get all those sales that we've invested several years in preparing sold this year, while at the same time preparing new sales to be on track to sell next year under the new resource management plan. So it's been a challenging year, but we are on track, and we are on track to be up to full implementation by 2020. Assuming there's no unforeseen circumstances that would derail us. Maybe I'll pause there and just see if there's any questions with respect to the timber program before I move on to other areas. Or
Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much for the map in the packet. That's really helpful to know your area. How many other districts are there in Oregon?
In Oregon, there's 7 other districts, and then there's 1 district in Washington. So a total of 9 districts within Oregon, Washington.
So the other ones are Roseburg, Medford.
In Western Oregon, it's
Bend,
Roseburg, Medford, Coos Bay, Lakeview, Prineville,
Burns,
Vail, Burns, Spokane.
That's it in Oregon, and then
in Spokane. Yeah. Thank you. This is very helpful because for I won't say old timers, but for people that were older, we had other districts to remember. My own interest in the BLM, it goes back to my own upbringing in Coos County, and I was fortunate at age 25 to be in the staff for the conference committee on the Federal Policy and Planning and Management Act, FLPMA. So there are actual people behind these these laws you guys help administer. A tiny bit of time, about a year and a half spent on that, on FLPMA as it went through the House. So in terms of the non-timber activities, you talked about the lighthouse, you talked about the Frisbee golf course. I know you've got other things. Could you just go over a little bit more about what the non-timber things are?
Sure. As I mentioned, we do have a very significant recreation program, providing a variety of different opportunities.
You have campgrounds?
We have campgrounds. The Fisherman's Bend out of Salem is one of our big ones. We got Clay Creek, Whitaker, drawing a blank right now, Sharps Creek. So we have a variety of campgrounds in the area. A number of day use sites as well, different got quite a few mountain bike trails, ATV areas, so just a variety of activities. We also have a very active restoration program and do a lot of aquatic restoration, and there's some specific projects that are highlighted in the update.
Okay.
There. We do a number of other restoration activities for different types of species, and in the Eugene wetlands is the West Eugene wetlands is one example where we've had a fairly active restoration program there, working with the Corps of Engineers and the City of Eugene and the Nature Conservancy, and focused on trying to restore some of the wet prairie habitat that's very little of that left in the Willamette Valley. So it's just we also do some other types of restoration activities, as we are doing some oak habitat restoration as well. So just different types of restoration activities that we have ongoing.
Could you tell us a little bit about the funding on that, the RAC, and the release of the funding on the RAC?
Sure. The good news with respect to the RAC is we did get a new charter here recently, so we do have a RAC that is in place with a current charter. The bad news is that we do have 5 vacant positions. We have provided nominations that are back in DC right now, so we're just waiting for those to get approved. And once those are approved, then we'll have a fully staffed RAC. We are hoping to schedule a meeting this in the next couple months to address some of our recreation fee proposals. It's just been a challenge to schedule a meeting when we only have 10 current members, because we need 9 members present to have a quorum, and just trying to find a date that we can have a quorum has been challenging, but we are working on that and hope to have that soon. The Secure Rural Schools legislation was passed here recently. We haven't received a whole lot of information yet on that, but we're we will be getting funding to continue with funding projects under the Secure Rural Schools. And I don't know, David, if you have any additional information on that.
Only that the Secure Rural Schools Act expired about a year and a half ago, so there was a bit of a gap there between the receipts coming in and going out under Secure Rural Schools. So as Jose said, that was passed about 4 weeks ago now with the omnibus bill in Washington, and it takes time for the guidance to come down from Washington to get to us. And so as soon as we find out, we'll convene the RAC and see what we can do to get that money spent out to restoration projects.
One thing about our district I forgot to mention, I'll just mention real quick, is we are located in 3 different offices. Our main district office is in Salem, and we also have 2 field offices located there. We have a satellite district office here in Springfield, and 2 field offices here as well, the Upper Willamette and the Sayusta field office. And then we have a field office located in Tillamook.
Commissioner Lycan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good to see you again. So really appreciate it. So, of course, as you know, I'm now replacing our longtime member of ONC Association, Commissioner Stewart. So I've replaced Commissioner Stewart representing the ONC counties here at Lane County. And a couple things. First of all, thank you for being here. And in fact, I would hope that we can continue this as somewhat of an annual event. I think this would be very, very beneficial for here, those of us at the board, those of us who watch TV, I guess, when they watch the commission, but I think for you too, and just so we can have this back and forth dialogue. So what I want to really ask a couple questions related to, I mean, as you know, last year was a severe year for forest fires. But of course, BLM, with their contract with ODF, you did not see the fire issue on the BLM lands that you did on other lands. I won't mention U.S. Forest Service too loud, but anyway, just kidding. But first of all, I just want to say that the contract you have with ODF, I mean, obviously it's a terrific partnership, and I think it was very beneficial when you came to the fires. We've seen the graphs about BLM land compared to other lands, you know, when the percentage is extremely low on BLM land. So congratulations on that. The question I have, though, is there has been ongoing conversations about the contract with ODF, and it was my understanding the last association meeting we had, it sounds like it's going to kind of revert back to where it was many years ago, almost like a rollover type of contract agreement, and I don't know if I'm correct on that or not. Can you potentially share some information on how that's going and where you are today? Because frankly, the benefits there are, from my perspective, and I think from many people's perspective, is very, very positive. And as we can obviously see from last year, so many of us in this area and throughout the state, you couldn't even get outside for a period of time because the smoke was so bad. But if you could maybe just share some information on that, I think we'd be very appreciative. And again, I just really want to say thank you for that ongoing agreement you've had and with ODF.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be glad to. We are in the process of negotiating a new instrument with ODF. In the past several years, it's been a contract. It's looking like we'll be going back to an agreement instead of a contract with ODF. From my perspective, it's been a really good partnership with them, and it makes sense because a lot of our lands are checkerboard with private industrial timberlands, which ODF provides protection for. So to have them also providing, initial attack and protection for our lands just makes sense in terms of having kind of seamless coverage across that landscape. So it has worked well. There has been challenges as the cost of fighting wildfires has gone up, and so we are in the process of negotiating a new agreement. I don't really have a lot of the specific details, but my understanding is that it is moving along, and we should have a new agreement in place with them probably mid-June would be my guess, just in time for fire season.
Yeah.
And there will be some differences in that, and I think it will require us to probably take a little bit more active role in managing the wildfires, working with ODF, but the essential partnership will stay in place.
And one last thing, I just wanted you to be aware. So their last AOC Legislative Committee meeting in Salem, so a motion was made. It was my recommendation. The motion was made, though, by Commissioner Hare from Josephine County, which is fine. But what that was asking our national association to be more engaged with the administration as far as political appointments are concerned. Because I got to tell you, we're well into the second year of the administration. There's still no BLM director, and frankly, I find that to be disappointing.
Well.
Disappointing. Yeah, no, and I would agree. I find that to be very disappointing, and I think you're seeing commissioners around, not just here in Oregon, but around the country, beginning to cry their displeasure of these key appointments who have not been in place, and to provide some sort of direction, I guess, from their perspective. But we're being critical of it, and just so you know, I just wanted you to be aware. Obviously, it has nothing to do with your local office, but really from the more higher echelon, if you will, that where are these appointments, these key appointments that, frankly, if you've been in our state or if you've been in areas where there's BLM lands, you kind of have an expectation that these folks will be appointed to these, what we call, very, very important positions. And yet that's not occurring, and so we are beating the drum as hard as we can and also being pretty critical about the fact that has not been done. Not to take away from the work that you do, I think we're very appreciative. I'm happy to hear that you're looking to increase the harvest levels through 2020, which is that's good news to hear overall. But thank you for the work you do, and as you know, not just the ONC Association, but I think commissioners as a whole, whether we agree or disagree, we're here to provide just I think provide just information, and that's why I think it would be very beneficial for us to have these annual type of get-togethers, and where you can present, we can ask questions about where we are today. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you, and I would welcome having an annual meeting. So I apologize for taking me so long to meet with you all. I have been trying to get out to meet with all the counties within our district. And I think David, when he was acting, had met with you here a little over, probably about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, it was back in December 2016. So.
Thank you.
I will mention real quickly, too, with respect to our fire program. We do have an interagency dispatch center here in Springfield that includes Willamette National Forest, Usla National Forest, Northwest Oregon District of the BLM, the Fish and Wildlife Service refuges. So we're all working together in our dispatch center, and we also have ODF presence there this summer. And we do have in addition to having a good partnership with ODF, we also have a very strong partnership with the Forest Service with respect to fires, and that we have a shared fire organization between the Sayusla, Willamette National Forest and ourselves as well. So.
I think one thing that I would add to your questions, Commissioner, is about our current leadership, and thank you for noticing. We do have some issues at the national level. One of the conversations that I've had with friends, both in public and in private, has been the fact that BLM invests an awful lot of authority in its local managers at the field level. And so one of the strengths that I think we have as an agency is in our ability to be able to make decisions and act and move as we will. And so that's why I think it's so important that we continue to have conversations like this, have conversations with our field managers, especially the two that are here managing the Sayusla field office, the Upper Willamette field office, because that's where the action's really going to take place. Politics being local, it's good to have good relationships with our local offices.
Yeah, great.
And speaking of local updates, I just wanted to bring your attention to a couple of projects you may have heard of and be tracking on in respect to how we are working with the City of Eugene, for example, and a number of other partners to increase awareness of wildfire risk. We do have a community assistance grant with the City of Eugene that we're implementing right now in the South Hills area and also within city limits. I was trying to find the dollar amount for the latest grant award for you, but it's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. You may also have heard about the Thurston Hills Trail Development Project, working with Willamette.
We're very involved in that, so very much so.
And then another item you may have heard of or seen recently, we've been getting great news coverage on it. We're going to be doing some important maintenance work on the Row River Trail this summer. There will be a temporary partial closure. We'll be replacing some culverts, doing some resurfacing, but a short-term temporary closure will buy us a lot in terms of long-term durability of the trail surface. And we've been getting a lot of great support from City of Cottage Grove and others for doing that upcoming work.
Including the former mayor of Cottage Grove.
Yeah, I think you just beat Commissioner Williams to his question. But he was next in the queue. Commissioner Williams.
Well, a couple of short comments. One, congratulations on the partnerships that you're able to create, particularly with Oregon Department of Forestry. I spent a great part of the end of my summer in smoke. And Commissioner Lycan joined me a few times in going up and observing what was going on. The real contrast is that BLM lands, private lands, there were no conflagrations going on in those areas. When there was any kind of problem, suppression was immediate. Prevention is a big piece of that. So I really, really appreciate the work that you do in that area in taking care of those fires when they first occur, not assess on what's going to be the outcome other than a lot of lost timber. Secondarily, Row River Trail, I was privileged as mayor at the time when the Rails to Trails project actually occurred. And so Commissioner Stewart, who sat in this chair, I think it must have been about 2005, we recognized that the Row River Trail, as great as it it is and was, it had some deficiencies, and part of that deficiency was connectivity between Cottage Grove and Oak Ridge, West Fir. And so I remember that BLM was a partner with us in helping to obtain some funds to pave that last, not really mile, just a short section of that impervious surface that was gravel. And so partnering with a lot of different folks, Cottage Grove and Oak Ridge, but also BLM was very helpful in bringing that project to completion. We have attracted international bike events, statewide bike events. It's really been helpful to those two communities in particular, that there is a linkage and a worldwide response to that linkage in participation of bicyclers coming from everywhere. And you're to be commended for the work that you recognize on the Row River Trail, that there are some infrastructure needs there, and thank you for focusing on that. It means a great deal to the people in South and East Lane County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Farr.
I'm just going to be very brief and bring it down to the 500-foot level from the elevation that it's been at. This weekend, I had a chance to drive from Alma to Alsta. Now, you know the road that goes from Alma to Alsta? It goes past Clay Creek and Whitaker Creek. And I'll tell you what, if you've not taken that drive, it is astounding. It's probably one of the most beautiful drives in Lane County, which is the most beautiful county in Oregon, which is the most beautiful state in the nation. So what does that make that road? One of the best roads in the nation. Along the Siuslaw River, and the two facilities are remarkable. The gates were closed. You know, it's not quite time for them to open the campground yet. But we had a chance to walk around in there, and my son said to me, well, what is the Department of the Interior doing here? I said, well, that is the BLM, Pat. And we talked about that, and it is, you know, there are larger issues that you tackle. When a fire breaks out, you guys are right on it, as both of the commissioners have already stated. But I really want to point out that we really enjoyed the trip, and the work that sometimes goes unrecognized, the work that the BLM does to make sure that people are able to enjoy the place that we live. You do a good job. Thank you.
Thank you. And those sites will be open by Memorial Day.
Right on.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a few comments and then a couple questions. First, I just want to note, just to have it out there, that we actually are not in agreement with the RMP, and that we're actually participating through the ONC counties in legal action against it. We won't get into the details of that, you know, issues over modeling and yields and everything else, and how it interacts with the ONC Act. So we'll look beyond that, just to the fact that you guys are incredible partners and doing great work and being collaborative. You know, we've talked about the ODF firefighting contract, or now soon to be agreement, but also the public-private that goes on, because you have this checkerboard. And if you look at your map, almost all that yellow checkerboard is in Lane County. You know, the majority of your checkerboard, so that your cooperation with private timber owners that are part of that checkerboard has just been incredible over the years, about road maintenance, about firefighting, about joint management and coordination of contracts. You guys have, you know, whether a gate needs to be put across the road because you're having issues, the work you guys have done in funding some of our rural deputies that help keep some of the nuisance, you know, everything from, you know, the destruction of timber by target shooting that has gone on some of the, you know, some of the hilltops, and to just keeping the dumping out of there, and some of the off-road that goes beyond and damages actual riparian areas. So, you know, those partnerships that you've developed over the years, whether it's with the private landowners, whether it's with ODF, whether it's with us here in Lane County and our Sheriff's Department, have just been a wonderful aspect of our relationship with BLM. And I just want to, you know, take a moment to recognize that and the great work you do. And I can't say enough about the firefighting and initial attack philosophy that ODF and BLM have adopted, and what that's done around here. Because, you know, same number of starts on non-U.S. Forest Service land as there were on Forest Service land, but the number of acres burned was 90% in Forest Service land and about 10% in non-Forest Service land. There's a reason that happens. Well, it goes back to U.S. Forest Service directives and how they fight fire, and that's something we'll have to work on in other venues to try and change those directives, because some of their strategies around wilderness firefighting have just become archaic, and non-recognition of not all their wilderness is isolated. It's not Alaska when you get a start down there in southern Oregon, and what time of year does that start happen? So really appreciate that. So can you talk a little bit, I also just want to recognize seeing some of you all up there at the whole damn EIS meeting. That's going to be an interesting project you guys have to work through. One of 9 high hazard dams you guys own in the country. But an important, most people around here call it Horton Lake, not Holt Pond. That's a really important recreational facility for that particular area of the county that the Horton store practically lives off of. Right. In the summertime, that's their main source of revenue. So to have that impacted would be a big thing for that area. But then again, it is a high hazard dam, and a failure would actually create a potential loss of life. So we understand why you have to go through that. So can you talk a little bit about road and culvert maintenance budget? As I mentioned that public-private partnership, and one of the reasons why you guys do such a great job of firefighting is you don't have a mission to tear up all your roads.
Right. Just on the partnerships real quick, I might ask Dave to talk about the budget, since he's kind of manages our overall budget. The partnerships are absolutely critical for us. We wouldn't be able to do what we do across the board, whether it's maintaining our roads, fighting fires, recreation, restoration activities, if it wasn't for those partnerships. So we really value those and invest a significant amount of time in developing and maintaining those partnerships, because it's absolutely critical for us to be able to do what we do.
Regarding the budget, there's a couple of things, especially as it relates to road maintenance. We've got a number of different funds that we can pull from, some of which you're familiar with, of course, because of our partnerships with the adjacent private landowners. We have agreements that are decades old now, in which companies have paid into funds for us to be able to maintain certain roads, and of course they maintain certain roads on our behalf. That's all part of our realty program. So there is a fund that we can draw from for certain roads to be able to do road maintenance, to do culvert replacement. We also have, of course, the appropriated funds, which over the last few years have been kind of flat. The last couple of years, there's been actually proposals at the national level to reduce the amount by significant percentages. In the end, we support the president's budget because, going after certain things that will help reduce deficits, reduce the national debt, I think are in the best interest of the country. At the same time, it produces problems at the local level. And so we have to make decisions about, how we fund our own workforce, how we fund particular projects. A lot of these things end up, for culvert replacement, we look at priorities like where the timber sales are going to be happening and try and think a couple of years ahead so that we can make sure that the roads are in great condition, so that we're not slowing down the timber sales, and so we prioritize culverts that way. Oftentimes, a member of the public will identify problems to us where there are problems, for example, with fish passage. They're not allowing fish species to be able to pass through because there's too big of a jump between an old culvert and where the stream base is now. Or a place is too narrow or it's too overgrown. Those are kinds of things, those are maintenance issues that we can put in a list and prioritize as well. It is more and more becoming a question for us to have to deal with questions of priorities. Where are we going to be able to get the biggest bang for the buck, I guess is the best way of putting it, that will support all of these competing priorities and still be able to meet resource needs. So. Well, we do our best, but if you have specific areas on the ground that you're concerned about, we can talk about where those are and how they fit into our normal maintenance schedule and upcoming timber sales schedule.
Thanks. So, yeah, and I just want to also mention those partnerships through the RAC. A lot of that fish passage work is done with the Saisla Watershed Council and the Longtime Watershed Council, and I'm sure that some of the other watershed councils in the county.
They've been fantastic partners actually over the last many years, from the old Eugene district and carrying forward into the new district. It's been a privilege to be able to work with those watershed councils. They're both a great partner in getting projects done and an early warning system to tell us where, the potential problems are going to be.
So my next question is kind of a post-fire question. I toured the Yellow Point fire, about a year afterwards. The private landowners had completely salvage logged all of their land, all of the BLM lands that were, and they weren't touched as bad. They were just fringes here and there. None of it had been. In fact, you guys were just getting the contracts out. It was taking that long, basically. Which means the later you wait on a salvage, the less value there is, the less likely you're going to get a bid. And I think some of those actually went no bid. Can you talk about, is there an effort to try and expedite and change that? Because the same thing happened with Big Windy and a few others down in southern Oregon. I saw the same thing. Private land salvage log within 6 months to a year, while the mills are, it's also about hitting mills with charred logs because you can't mix the two. And you want them to have them coming in at that same time. And same thing. The private lands have been done. Contracts were just getting let on the BLM portions that had been burned. Is there an effort to change that?
I think under the new resource management plan, it will be better. It still will take us probably a year just to do the NEPA that's required and be able to get those sales sold. I think both the Coos Bay and the Roseburg districts are doing some salvage sales from the fires from last summer, and those will be sold this year is the plan.
So that kind of brings me to a second question. Is it a matter of maybe getting legislation through that allows you to do like a pre-NEPA for salvage logging that would allow you guys to go almost immediately into contracting? Because it seems like when you get into the salvage logging, as far as the NEPA goes, it's the same almost every time you're going through it. It's, you're trying to remove these trees before they, if you don't salvage log, the reburn possibility in the next 10 years, I forget what is about 50% for reburn, and other issues that create, you really don't want more carbon in the air, and you don't really want to reburn that habitat. So there's benefit to the salvage logging, not only that, and capturing some of the value of what's left standing. Is there something we can do? As you look at us as we are, through the ONC Association, through AOC, through NACO, we do have the ability to lobby for legislation. Is there something we can do maybe that might help in that expediting salvage logging?
Perhaps I'm a little reluctant to go into too much, just because that's not something I'm real familiar with.
Yeah.
Just because we haven't, we don't deal with that much in our district.
I guess
we have a certain amount of authority under the National Environmental Policy Act to be able to do salvage logging, and I can't remember what the exact acreage under a categorical exclusion, which actually will speed up the process.
For smaller sales.
Yeah, for small sales. There's, an interesting analogy perhaps is in this last omnibus bill, there was a similar kind of authority that was passed, a categorical exclusion authority for hazardous fuels reduction in forests. And it went from, I can't remember a few hundred acres, I suppose, under categorical exclusion now up to 3,000 acres. And that's very helpful. It requires us to probably do a little bit more analysis about how that project might look in the end. But a categorical exclusion versus an environmental assessment process is much abbreviated. And, you know, so maybe there are opportunities that's for, you know, legislative minds to help work out, you know, something that there's all I'm saying is there's an analogy there that's a recent example, you know, possibly to look at.
Okay. Well, and I didn't expect an immediate answer so much, but if there is something, I'll make the offer here. If there is something we can do to help you all out, you know, do your jobs faster, better, let us know and you know, and make us aware so we can further one more partnership between us, you know, whether, you know, now you guys are paying for a couple deputies for us, you know, we can pay you back maybe in helping get, you know, push stuff through you know, up there in DC and get you things just like we're trying to get you permanent leadership.
And on that, we really appreciate working with the sheriff's office on that. Those two deputies out in the woods have been
amazing.
They've been amazing. They've been very helpful and a great support to our Ranger program.
They do a fantastic job.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. So, anything further from the board?
Carry that forward to our state office in terms of the offer. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Sorensen.
you just with that last semi-comment, you just piqued my interest in the topic of the reorganization of the BLM. You mentioned the state office, and and my understanding is that Secretary Zinke announced that there was going to be some changes in the organization of the Interior Department, maybe specific to BLM or maybe overall, I can't remember. And of course, there are fears that, at least I have fears that the administration is going to appoint someone really with an agenda completely opposite the laws that the BLM is supposed to administer. But that is more on the political end. But on the reorganization, where the secretary, who is confirmed and is in the job, he's talking about the reorganization. How does that affect, or do you know anything about how it affects the, the Pacific Northwest and, are they going to go to the standard federal regions that President Nixon put into effect, Region 10, Region 9, et cetera, or what are they doing? Or do you know?
It's still in progress, and they're looking at a number of different options, and where it ends up, it's hard to guess. But that is one of the things that they were looking at, is to have consistent regions across DOI, so that the BLM would have the same region as the Fish and Wildlife Service and the USGS and so on, to facilitate better coordination across.
Would that integrate with the current federal reorganization? Because it was a reorganization 40 years ago, but it gave us the standard federal regions, or is that just having regions that are consistent within the Interior Department?
I think they're looking primarily within the Interior Department.
So like the Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Service, USGS would all be and BLM would all have their same regions.
And that's what they were, one of the things that they were looking at, as well as, the possibility of moving the headquarters from Washington, D.C. out west to Denver or some area like that. So there's just a number of ideas and things that are being looked at.
But the Denver Chamber of Commerce would like that.
They've also looked at other regional proposals like the Forest Service has, to inform the process for the Department of the Interior. And as Jose alluded to, the fact that, all these agencies within the Department of the Interior had different regional boundaries. Bureau of Reclamation, was different than the Fish and Wildlife Service, was different than the Park Service, and different than BLM. It was the Secretary's intent to try and bring all of those into some kind of an alignment.
Okay.
We've seen a couple of proposals for Oregon. The latest one keeps Oregon primarily intact, except for a small piece down in the Klamath Falls area. And so, again, I think that one of the main takeaways for us is how it would affect business for us is trying to keep the decisions and the concerns as much at the local level as we can, and where the decisions are actually being made, is going to be a great strength. It might not affect our district at all, even if it does kind of play with the boundaries of the larger region.
Okay. Does this reorganization plan have anything to do with further consolidation of local offices, like getting rid of the Eugene office, or, we have this problem really at all levels of government, where these regions were set up before the invention of the telegraph. They were set up before the invention of the telephone, and certainly before the invention of email. And so these regions had a lot of vitality when they were set up, and now with communications being so instantaneous for most people, what is the reason for a region?
Well, I think the emphasis now is more on looking at how we can reduce the size of the Washington office, and how we can streamline or reduce the state or regional offices to put more resources at the ground level. So I think that's not a big focus right now to look at additional consolidation of districts or field offices. It's focused more at the higher levels in terms of the reorganization, the state regional boundaries, and the Washington office.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question about sustained yield. We know that the forests continue to grow, never stop. Harvest levels regarding sustained yield, current harvest levels, where are they at in comparison with the capability of meeting the total sustained yield? Does my question make sense, first of all?
It does, and it kind of gets back to the point that Commissioner Bozovich brought up earlier about the difference between some of the counties in terms of and the RMP. And if you look at sustained yield across the entire BLM lands, and then we're under that. If you look at how we're managing the harvest land base, which is about 25% of the land base, and those are the lands that we're managing under sustained yield. So it's we're managing part of the land base under sustained yield, but then there's other areas of the BLM lands that are managed for other purposes, whether it's to provide habitat for spotted owls or other species. So there's just a variety of different objectives that we're trying to meet under the resource management plan.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question? Or so if you look at across the entire landscape at all the BLM lands, and then no, we're not managing all the lands for sustained yield. We are managing the harvest land base that's designated in the RMP for sustained yield.
I guess my my thoughts is if there is 500 billion board feet annually that's out there to harvest, and we're harvesting, say, 10 or 12% of that, but we could be harvesting more. We hear a lot about the issues of rural law enforcement, and we used to pay for that with timber receipts. And then when that went away, Congress throws us a bone with secure rural schools. And that went away for a period. It has been brought back with the latest legislative action. But the funding for rural patrols is probably not in the cards unless we get greater harvests. That's what will help mitigate that problem of lack of rural law enforcement in rural areas. So, just a thought.
Yeah. And I think the challenge for us is trying to meet the variety of different laws. There's the ONC Act, which we're under, but we also have to meet the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water Act, and so on. So it's trying to find the balance so that we're consistent with all the different acts that we have to meet. And so that's, from our perspective, that's what our resource management plan tried to do. Obviously, there's some differences of opinion. There's some court cases out there, and it'll be decided by the courts, really, in terms of what what is our future direction. So.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the board? Anything else you guys want to tell us today?
No, thank you.
No, thank you for coming. I really appreciate the conversation and appreciate your time, and maybe we'll see you next year.
You will. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And let's all hope for a nice, quiet fire season.
Yeah.
Indeed. And we'll bring back Alex Kyler and go back to item 8C and get to the second portion of that, which was Order 1804-1707 in the matter of adopting updated priorities and principles for the Oregon legislature. And I know we kind of cut Commissioner Sorensen off. Did you have a further question on the first portion?
Yeah, thank you very much. And no, you didn't really cut me off. I think that we all have to recognize that running the meeting is difficult and keeping up with all the things that you have to do, Mr. Chair, and running the meeting. So I don't feel like you cut me off. I did want to ask, though, about I was kind of making the transition to this agenda item, which is the proposed order, and I see that you took the previous year's memo and kind of put in the changing the paragraphs so that they be aligned. And I couldn't quite tell, is there anything different from this year's proposal, which is basically have the board say, we'd like you to work with the legislature in a proactive way, state and federal, and I just wanted to get an idea of if there was any policy change from previous years.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sorensen, I think I'm going to address that right now.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Alex.
Actually, before we go to the order.
Okay. Commissioner.
On the first part of the agenda. Back to HB 4034. That's the one requiring.
Sorry, I forgot about it.
Relating to areas within the urban growth boundary that are zoned for single-family dwellings. The bill didn't pass, but it got wrapped into 4031, which was kind of wrapped into Senate Bill 1051. I was here last night. Then we have a July 1st deadline on the law that was passed, not in the short session, but in the long session, which is, let's see.
July 31st.
It's, Senate Bill 1051. So the city of Eugene is beginning to address the requirement that municipalities and counties over 15,000 have to allow ADUs on detached single-family residences. Required to allow that. The city of Eugene last night, we had 57 people sign up to speak at that microphone last night. 6 of them wanted to talk about Uber. The rest of them wanted to talk about ADUs. And really what's happening with I didn't sign up because I thought I might have an opportunity to talk from this mic instead of that mic, and I'm going to take that opportunity right now. The city of Eugene is addressing it in a phased fashion. And so they're phasing in. They're going to address the ADUs and address Senate Bill 1051 by passing an ordinance to allow in R2, R3, and R4, not touching the R1 element of it. Now, of course, greater than 90% of the opportunity is in R1, and the city of Eugene currently has an ADU. They do allow for ADU inside of R1, but it really is not compliant with what the recommendations that are coming out of LCDC or DLCD, which the city of Eugene allows R1 on lots over 7,000 square feet, and they have a number of other requirements. So the tiny little nudge that they gave it, that they're giving it through the consideration of what they call phase 1 of implementing Senate Bill 1051, really does very little. And last night we heard a great deal of opposition from the Neighborhood Leaders Council, who wanted to slow down the process even further. So the city of Eugene does a pretty darn good job of slowing things down. And the Neighborhood Leaders Council, mainly from the southern and eastern part of the city. I didn't hear anybody from North Eugene. I didn't hear anybody from West Eugene. But they want to slow down the process so the neighborhood can make certain that they fulfill what they say is the law, that they weigh in on every single move the city makes. I'm not going to talk very much about that, but Mr. Mokrahysky, we are a county over 15,000. And we are required now to allow for ADUs on any single-family residence, detached single-family residence that is inside the urban growth boundaries of the county. And I'm not going to talk too much about it right now, but and I'm going to ask you, Alex, to just discuss what we are, the direction that we are heading on this. But I'm going to go to the DLCD. Put out a guidance on implementing the accessory dwelling units requirement under Senate Bill 1051, and it's pretty comprehensive, and it really causes you to sit up and take a look at what is being required and requested and demanded by the state that the cities and the counties look at as far as ADU, as far as how we address ADUs. That's an auxiliary dwelling units. That's additional places for people to live, presumably with lower rents, adding to the value of the lot. So, for instance, the siting standards. Typically, an ADU could be developed on any legal lot or parcel as long as it met the required setback and coverage limits. Local government should not mandate a minimum lot size for ADUs. City of Eugene currently mandates 7,000. I'm not sure exactly where we are. So, Alex, my question for you is, without me going into too much detail on this 7-page document that's put out by DLCD, which we all should be highly aware of, we all should take a very close look at, because these are the recommendations that they're making that they'll be judging how we respond on. What are we doing on responding to really what 4034 kind of became, or kind of wrapped into, which is Senate Bill 1051 and House Bill 4031, which was passed in the short session?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Farr, so just to clarify, the language in Senate Bill 1051 was amended by House Bill 4031.
Correct.
So any guidance
Scribner's error that was amended.
Excuse me?
DLCD says it was a Scribner's error that was amended.
Okay.
That's what it says right here. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I guess my point being any guidance that refers to Senate Bill 1051, I think we probably ought to be a little leery of, because the operative legislation is now House Bill 4031, and irrespective of whether DLCD calls it a Scribner's error, it was a very significant change in what was done. The previous bill, Senate Bill 1051, said counties shall develop, code language for ADUs. The current bill says that counties shall develop language for only those lands within the UGB.
Exactly.
That said, we have urban transition agreements with a number of cities in Lane County where you essentially will co-adopt their code language.
Precisely.
My understanding is that our staff will be coming to you with those co-adoption opportunities in the very near future. I don't exactly know when that's scheduled to be on the agenda, but I do know that staff are looking at those codes where we do have urban transition agreements, and I know we have urban transition agreements with Eugene and Springfield. Commissioner Bozovich, you may be aware of whether we have one with Florence or not.
I don't believe we do.
But at any rate, I know that where we do not have those agreements, that county staff will be coming to you with those kinds of code changes for those cities. So that's definitely in the works. I've confirmed that with them. I think the questions that you had with respect to minimum lot size, my sense is that's probably a question that's better posed to Andy Clark, County Council, rather than me. I know what the bill says, and I'm actually unaware if there is a rulemaking process that DLCD has gone through, or if it's just going to be guidance that they issue. But that's my initial thought. I have not seen the document you're referring to that DLCD published.
Thank you. It's a pretty extensive document, and really my point here, and for the board, is that we do co-adopt with the City of Eugene. So the discussion that's going through the City of Eugene right now, they're going to ask us to say yes to, which means that we need to pay very close attention to the way the City of Eugene is handling this at this point in time, and they're dancing with it. They're not doing anything with it. They're not addressing R1, for instance. They're not addressing the provisions of allowing ADUs on church properties, for instance. So the phase one that they're going through right now does very little. It's R2, R3, and R4, which how many single-family detached are in R1, R2, 3, and 4? And the neighborhood council is saying that those houses are illegal anyway. So the neighborhood council is trying very hard. These are the small group of people who, by the way, were refuted by other people who live in those neighborhoods during the same discussion last night. They're saying, well, those people, the people who are saying that they represent the neighborhoods, really don't represent me and don't represent people and the renters, for instance. They don't represent the renters. So my point is that we need to move forward on this, and we need to pay very close attention, Mr. Mokrahajski, to what the city is doing, because in May, before the deadline of July 31, they're going to ask us to say, yes, we'll do what you say, because we are, as you have noted, we have an agreement with them that anything inside the urban transition, we acquiesce to city rules, because ultimately it's going to be in the city limits anyway. Don't know how long, don't know when. But my point to the board is that we can't just let this slide by with the City of Eugene, mainly what it seemed last night, the neighborhood council from mostly South Eugene, it just happened to be, it could be from other parts of Eugene too, but they're the ones that are the most active, and they're the ones that really lean the hardest on the city council to adopt the things that they believe are the best things for their neighborhood. And if you hear them, they say we need to slow things down so that we can adopt it to each neighborhood rather than have a general uniform plan, which is what Senate Bill 1051 calls for. So we need to be very attentive to it and not just let it kind of come in at the last minute and say, and have one of the Board of County Commissioners say, no, we need to slow this down because we've not talked about it enough yet. Well, we need to be alert to it at this point in time, because right now is when the City of Eugene is talking about it. You know, the headlines of the paper today, the City Council will talk about Uber, will pass Uber. Well, last night there was a public hearing on Uber, or on ride sharing, and on Senate Bill 1051. 6 people signed up for ride sharing. 51 people signed up for 1051. The first 10 or 12 people talked about how we need to slow things down. The rest of the people talked about how we need to add ADUs, because it's a great way for people to, everybody wins. In particular, people who are able to move off of the streets and into housing, or from less substantial housing into housing, or from larger houses into smaller houses. You know, it's a movement in all directions to allow more front doors inside of the urban growth boundaries. So this will be the 4th time I've said it. We need to pay very, 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 very close attention to what the City of Eugene is doing right now, because ultimately we're going to have to agree or disagree with what they do, and we have a deadline of July 31st to allow this to happen. So that's sorry to go on about that, Alex. And I promise you I'd throw you a softball. I know you've been working on it, but the thing that I needed to talk about is that we're in conjunction with the City of Eugene right now. They're working on it, and I don't know how close attention we're paying to it, because yeah, I looked around. I was the only one here from the county last night.
Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And on that subject, it's interesting hearing from Commissioner Farr, because the city of Springfield's taken a completely different approach. And in fact, my last meeting I had with Mayor Lundberg, so they're being much more, I don't know if aggressive is the right word, but comprehensive, we'll put it that way. Putting much more of a comprehensive approach towards the idea of ADUs, and how, especially with some of the areas that are part of that urban transition area, Glenwood is an example, the Hayden Bridge area is another example, some areas out in the Gateway are another example too, about how we can partner with that. But so Steve, my question to you is, so I knew that Lydia was, and the team was coming forward. Maybe at the next agenda meeting, can you remind us when that date is set? I'm assuming it's going to be before July 31st, long before July 31st, hopefully. But also because of the fact that we're a county that qualified on the first round, and the smaller counties didn't, they went through the issue, the short session. Because I know some of the questions that are being asked of the county is, what does this look like countywide? Because while we have this large metropolitan area here, outside of this area is very rural Lane County. So what does that mean? And even though we qualify, but that very rural part of Lane County almost at times seems like a small county outside of the metropolitan area. So I know that Lydia's getting phone calls from folks out in the who have F1 land saying, wait, does this qualify? Because I think once they see this, they immediately start asking questions, and which, no, it's not going to qualify. But anyway, it's so that's why I think it's well worth it to make sure we get an update from land management of exactly where we are. But I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Farr. And regarding Eugene, I know that, again, Springfield's taken a much different approach to it than the city of Eugene is.
And that was mentioned last night with cheers.
Yeah.
So before we move on to proposed legislative priorities, anything back on the 2018 session? I will note, I'm interesting that you mentioned R2, 3, and 4, because the actual legislation says that they shall allow them in areas that are zoned for detached single-family dwellings, and that's not what those zonings are for. R1's that zoning. Exactly. So if Eugene is not proposing an R1 change to be prepared to allow those by July 1st, 2018, they're going to be in violation of the state law. So I do think it's something we will need to pay attention to.
The beginning of the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chair, I think my recommendation in hearing both Commissioner Farr and Commissioner Lykin speak is Senate Bill 1051 as amended by House Bill 40.
I was reading House Bill 40.
Yes, I know you were.
So,
but that is the operative language, like I said, is I think pretty significantly different. And to clarify, Commissioner Lykin, so no, the only thing that the county will be doing is for those lands between the city limits and the UGB. The language about the unincorporated county was going to be operative. And they by 1051.
That's been punted at this point.
Significantly changed by 40.
I agree, but questions are being asked by folks outside, and that's why I think it's important to make sure we get clarification from land management when they do the update.
And this only applies for cities over 2,500 too, so we won't be talking about the urban growth boundary of Westford or Lowell.
Rural residential is something we'll talk about down the road. That's a much more in-depth conversation that we need to have. This is happening now.
I agree.
Actually, I think that's something for our next item, which is future priorities.
Yep.
Okay.
So, go ahead, Alex.
So I'd like, I'm going to be working off of attachment C now, which is a document that should look familiar to you because it is something we implemented, I think, gosh, probably 5 or 6 sessions ago now, to try to give staff a tool to utilize during session such that we are able to respond given a set of principles to questions on bills that may arise or concepts that may arise during the actual legislative session when we just don't have the luxury of getting stuff in front of legislative committee in a timely fashion. So there's a couple changes that I wanted to bring to your attention, and the first is that I think it makes sense for us to add sort of a tagline there at the very top of the document, which now will read updated by the Board of Commissioners April 17th, 2018. That should read.
Yeah.
We could just leave it and just have this for the 2021 session.
At any rate, Updated so that we know when this is a dynamic document, and so this, I think, in the future moving forward to do these periodic updates will be my practice, and if we just show when those were updated, I think it will be all the more accurate. So a couple things I did want to bring to your attention in this document as to changes that we discussed at the legislative committee is, for example, on page 2, now you will see Lane County 2019 legislative principles in that the session we're looking at now is the 2019 legislative session, which will begin I believe now in late January 2019.
Legislative days will be in September of this year, won't they start?
We will actually have some in May as well.
So, yeah, it's already beginning.
Already beginning, yep. And that's what, that's why we wanted to bring a couple of things to your attention. Under the general principles, we've made a change at number 2 there, which is to identify and oppose local preemptions, particularly those that inhibit opportunities for locally derived revenues. I think this gets kind of at the beer and wine tax discussion that's been going on for a number of years. There's a local preemption against that, and I think there's a number of different preemptions, and I think this principle sort of gets at those generally, and particularly those that that address revenue opportunities for the county. The other change that I wanted you to see in that section is under 17, protect the quality, accuracy, and completeness of the county's index of property transactions. This gets at the MERS issue at its heart, and really that county's role in accuracy of the county's index, I think is really important, particularly now that I've been through for the second time, but in a far more in-depth manner, this issue of the MERS lawsuit and the MERS issue and the impact of the county's index. The other changes I wanted to bring to your attention are at the very top of page 4. At the end, there are 3 new bullets that we are putting under Health and Human Services. One is to support policies and funding which address the prevention of suicide. If you've been following this issue at all, you'll see that there have been a number of tragedies, in particular lately, particularly among youth, and staff felt that putting this in was important. The other ones that we've added here include mostly the impacts from recreational marijuana. One is really trying to get at legislative efforts that are what we call social consumption, where there are a number of proponents who are very interested in seeing essentially a marijuana bar be established or something akin to a marijuana bar. And we think that issue will very likely come back in 2019. Under Public Works, you can see that I've X'd out or struck through a number of issues that were priorities for the 2017 legislature. And I've sort of changed those to, instead of pass a transportation bill in the 2017 session, now support efforts to implement that bill. The other one, and pertinent to the conversation that Commissioner Farr just had, at the very bottom of page 4, support reforms to Oregon land use laws, which first one is allow for farm-to-table operations on agricultural lands. This really gets at the heart of what happened up at Agrarian Ales. And then the second one, allow for counties to have additional flexibility with respect to siting accessory dwelling units. Gets at that issue that Commissioner Farr brought up. On page 5, under economic development, there's a couple of changes that we made. In particular, we just didn't have anything on the night. I realized we didn't have anything on the Knight Research Center, and I just thought, because that's been a couple session effort, and I think we'll continue to see funding advocacy for that research center, that we should add it to the legislative principles document. So finally, there are two very specific issues that the legislative committee addressed. The first one has to do with county law libraries. And in a nutshell, what I'm suggesting is that we potentially seek some legislation that would ensure that if a county law library is to be put into a new courthouse, that it's eligible for funding under the OCCIF, the Oregon Courthouse Capital Construction Improvement Fund. Right now, there's sort of a definition of court operations that are eligible for that kind of reimbursement or matching funds that are allowed under the OCCIF. Law libraries are not one of them. With that change that was passed in the 2018 legislature with respect to sort of court resource centers being affiliated with county law libraries, it just struck me that in particular those law library operations ought to be eligible for the 50 or 25% matching funds. I think the caveat to this new priority for Lane County ought to be that we need to be cognizant that there are some controversy over certain kinds of operations that are not in that fund right now. Specifically, DA operations are not considered to be a court operation. And there is some controversy over that. So I'm a little nervous that sort of opening up this can of worms may not be the wisest thing, but I think at least having you establish this as a priority and then leave it to the discretion of the administrator and myself as to whether we actually pursue it makes the most sense at this point in time. The second one is something County Council brought forward, and that's to amend Chapter 203, which in particular statutes that have to do with how county charters are amended to ensure that the review for the separate vote requirement, which is now within the Lane Circuit Court, which is now a decided issue within the confines of the Lane Circuit, is done after the signatures are gathered. And I think we've seen that a couple times actually now out of the Lane Circuit Court. And so the legislative change that that we're asking to pursue here is to actually modify ORS 203 to, and I think it's 203.725, is to ensure that separate vote requirement can actually be done at the same time the single subject review is done. That's actually prior to advocates going out and collecting signatures. And that would avoid at least some of the issues that the board has heard an awful lot about lately with respect and through public comment and whatnot. So those are the two changes that that I'm asking you to actually sort of prioritize at this point in time. Legislative committee is scheduled to meet again on May 24th. I'm certain we will probably have a couple new priorities, but again, I'll bring those forward at the report back from that legislative committee. This is just in the very short term and as a result of the last legislative committee meeting.
Thank you, Alex. I just want to maybe correct one thing you said, which was about the court's decision relative to separate vote. Judge Rasmussen basically said that the statute is silent as far as timing goes and does not establish a timing other than it has to be done prior to submission of the voters, which at the time of signature turn in and approval of the accurate number of signatures, the next step is submitted to the voters. That's the latest it can be done. And then this is, what we're requesting, I think, and this is to clarify that it should be done up front so people don't waste time collecting signatures. But I just want to make sure we're clear about that. He didn't actually assign a timing to be after signatures. He basically just said it's silent other than it has to happen prior to submission to the voters, if that makes sense. Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you. I periodically will be talking with folks at the University of Oregon about all the different things that are going on, mostly between my constituents and the University of Oregon. I just want to put a plug in for the University of Oregon Phil and Penny Knight campus for accelerating scientific impact. And the U of O, to avoid repeating that long phrase, University of Oregon Phil and Penny Knight campus for accelerating scientific impact, they have decided on the following phrase, the Knight campus. So I think we should try to, because it is a $1 billion investment going on in Lane County. It's pretty huge. And so people that don't know about it yet, I'm sure they will learn about it over time. And I think that there'll be a lot of benefits, just minimally the construction of it over time. So I'd like to make a request that we start using the term Knight campus to distinguish it from Knight Arena, Knight Library, Knight Law School, and whatever else is going on in the Knight family and their contributions to the University of Oregon. But this is to be distinguished from all these other activities as the Knight campus, and I think we ought to keep using the longer title for those who, when appropriate. Okay.
Any other questions or comments on the proposed priorities? Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Alex, I'm on the, when you were speaking to us earlier before we met with BLM, a couple of the things that were brought up, especially in the new committee I'm co-chairing, it seemed like so much of this landed there. And one of the areas that Commissioner Sorensen brought up, the climate change legislation. So we had a pretty robust conversation with commissioners throughout the state, because as you can imagine, some of the East Side commissioners aren't overly excited about the legislation. Even Marion County Commissioner was not excited about the legislation either. But what we came to the conclusion of, no matter what, that whether there's agreement or disagreement, the key is counties need to be at the table. And that was the direction that was given. Even those who disagreed with the quote-unquote legislation, what it may, the impacts it may have on their respective counties, or what they assume will be the impacts in their respective counties. There was an agreement, though, that the Associated Oregon Counties needs to be engaged in the conversation all the way through. That was the direction we gave. The other piece came down to building codes. And Commissioner Thompson from Clatsop County has been really engaged in some of these conversations as well. And I mentioned that Lane County has a real interest in building codes, and a lot of it is centered around mass timber, engineered wood, cross-laminated timber, things like that, where we probably need to pursue some language changes within the building codes to allow this type of production to happen or building to actually happen here. So I know Lane County was involved. We touched on it at the AOC committee, but I expect that that's actually going to get a little bit more interest from the entire committee as well as the legislative committee of AOC. But I know Lane County, and I'm glad you brought that up today as well, because I think that's something that we need to continue to have a conversation about, even though in the state of Oregon, I will say, the state of Oregon, the way they approach it is quite a bit different than other states. There is a little bit of flexibility and leeway here in the state of Oregon, but there does need to be a little bit of tightening up on those building codes. If this is going to be an area where there's real potential to build some of these large commercial buildings out of wood, out of engineered wood and mass timber. So there's probably needs to be some changes made there. So I'm glad you had brought that up earlier. And so I expect that should be a conversation that'll be happening really potentially statewide. So that's really all I had on this. And overall, it just, again, it's a big slate of opportunities. And the most important thing is we need to be dialoguing at the table constantly, making sure that the counties are not left out. And we represent Lane County. We do not want to be left out of these conversations. So thanks for the update, Alex.
Mr. Chair, could I ask for some clarification there? Commissioner Lycan, does that mean that you'd like the legislative committee to try to come up with something with respect to this, I don't know how you want to characterize it, either carbon tax or climate change measure?
No, I don't think so. I think right now, because I think the biggest challenge was, and Commissioner Bozovich, or Chair Bozovich brought this out, there hadn't been any sort of analysis done. And was very little, so we had no idea what the impacts were. I think from the legislative committee, I think it's something we need to keep there and make sure we have a discussion about no matter what. But so if the legislature is going to go down this road, what many of us are expecting them to in the 2019 session, that it's going to be key that we're at the table. So I'm not asking for anything in the legislative committee. I think it's just it's what I'm asking for is to make sure it's on our horizon, and probably coordinating as much as we can with. I'm guessing Mike Eliason will probably be the lead staff for AOC on this issue, but coordinating those conversations with Mike I think will be really important for us, because if there are some potential cost benefits that will benefit Lane County or counties in general, we need to understand what those are and really make sure that our voices are heard through this process. So that's really what I'm looking at more than anything else.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chair, I think the only thing I would offer at this time is if you're going to adopt this order, that you might want to add it as amended. There was a change that Commissioner Sorensen recommended in terms of changing Knight Research Center to Knight Campus.
Yeah, and I also think making sure that the first line says 2018.
My mistake on the date. Yeah.
On the date. So, yeah, we'll make sure that whoever makes the motion says as amended to correctly identify the Knight Campus and the date. Couple things I have, I just want to, and this is more for a future legislative committee. I was wondering if I was looking quickly and maybe I missed it, under public safety. Do we have anything specifically that addresses supporting additional funding for OSP?
Mr. Chair, not that I am aware of.
Because my reason for bringing that up is, we're well aware of our traffic fatality issues in this county, and quite a few of them happen on Highway 126, Highway 58, and other state highways that they are charged with patrolling, and enforcement's one of the key issues there. And we know that OSP's gone from 600 patrol officers down to 300 over the years, and we need to help defend their budget if we can, because it has an impact. They also provide backup to our deputies. The other place supporting the budget would be for DPSST, because of the issue of trying to get new deputies trained and the delays in getting them through classes and some of the proposals to cut classes in the past. So just as I probably should have thought about this when we were in legislative committee before, but just suggest those. I do want to note that I'm really happy to see the way you worded the MERS item about accurate records, because I've had to deal with zombie homes, and that's a huge issue, in trying to find out who actually owns the paper on that home. And then the second thing about that is the legislature raised the recording fees on documents to $60. Specifically to fund affordable housing, yet this legislation they were proposing around MERS would have been a go-around from using our recording system. So in one place they want to use our recording system to raise money for affordable housing, and in another place they're getting ready to cut the legs out from under our recording system. It just doesn't make sense and is inconsistent. So I really appreciate we have that item on our list as a legislative priority. So any other questions or comments on the proposed updated legislative priorities? Commissioner Farr.
Just one. We have this sheet, which is our strategic priorities, and I think you've done a superb job of staying inside of our strategic priorities as we move forward with our priorities in the legislature. So thank you.
So if no other comments, Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to move approval of Order 1804-1707 in the matter of adopting updated priorities and principles for the Oregon Legislature as amended. And do you want me to mention the amendments? Oh, as amended to replace, to use night campus and to make sure the date of 2018.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Lycan, seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve Order 1804-1707 as amended. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll take the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Good work, Alex. Thank you.
Very good.
And thank you for being flexible about splitting your item. So that moves us on to County Council announcements. We do not have executive session today. And is there any other announcements?
Not aware of any.
And then that gets us to Commissioners' business. Any announcements from Commissioners? Commissioner Lycan.
So I have a very positive announcement to make, and that concerns two women that I know from Springfield that deserve significant accolades. The first goes to Mercedes Russell, who has now officially, she will be a member of the New York Liberty of the WNBA. She was drafted, and so I got to first know her when she was a freshman in high school at 14 years old. So it's fantastic to see her career going all the way from Springfield High School to University of Tennessee, and now she's officially will be a member of the New York Liberty in the WNBA. So congratulations to Mercedes on that. And also a longtime friend of mine, Lori Palermo, and she becomes the very first realtor from the city of Springfield, or from the Springfield Board of Realtors, to be elected President-elect of the Oregon Association of Realtors. And so a big congratulations to her. That is she's so highly respected in our community, and when it comes to the business she's involved in. So very proud of her and the work that she's constantly does, and obviously her colleagues and peers from around the state feel the same way. And it was a competitive race, and she came out on top, so congratulations to Lori. So I just want to make note of both Mercedes and Lori. What an incredible honor for both of them. And by the way, Mercedes becomes the very first athlete from Springfield to be drafted into the WNBA. So, which is, I think the league's been going on for 20-something years now, and so very excited for her. And she just will need to get used to New York City now, so because that's where she will be living and where she will be playing from. So congratulations from her. And also, real quickly, I don't know if you saw, it was really all over the news, but two individuals from Arkland, really life-saving folks. There was an apartment fire across the street from Arkland. They're on 28th Street, right off of Main. Apartment fire. Two individuals on break just happened to see the fire and ended up saving 15 people, including, they got everybody out, including the entire family, who, from their second floor, they dropped their 3-year-old into their arms to save the 3-year-old as well as their family dog. So, I've already talked to Devin about it, and I think it's a really great opportunity to recognize the two of them for what they did. Obviously, they were just on break and just happened to see it at 2 o'clock in the morning, because that's a 24/7 type of operation. And without even hesitating, ran straight over there, called 911, and had the folks out of the apartment by the time the fire department was there. So
it'd be great to invite them here.
Yeah, it would be. So really pretty incredible, and just shows that folks will just step up when they need to, and they sure did. So I just wanted to make note of that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Other announcements, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. I spent a little bit of time talking about the urban transition today, and I'll continue to do that until there isn't one, until it's all inside the city limits. But as we know, the River Road Parks District, its tax base continues to shrink as the annexations, as Eugene gradually annexes lands that have been historically inside the Parks District, but now are going inside the City of Eugene's taxing district. So tonight there's an organizational meeting to explore the feasibility of creating a metropolitan park district. So the Commissioner Stewart and I first talked with Dave Wigand, oh golly, 5 years ago now, about the concept. And I know, Commissioner Bozievich, you've been hearing about this because many of the folks who live in that district are your constituents also. And so it's an uphill battle. Everybody acquiesces that because the City of Eugene has a parks district and they're pretty proud of it. But that means that
Department, district.
But if you look at, the Emerald Park is certainly a beautiful park, and the River Road Parks District is a remarkable parks district. They'd love to do something like Willamette Lane, but in order to do that, you have to start about 75 years ago, I believe, is how that works. So tonight they're going to be taking what they call the first step to put together a committee of Metropolitan Park District supporters. That's going to happen tonight at 7 p.m. at River Road Parks District out on Park Avenue, Lake Drive in the River Road area. So people are welcome to attend that. I will be there personally as a observer, small participant in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a brief update. Many of you know Pat Patterson. Yesterday he had his birthday party. He's 90 years old. Wow. Now, Pat is one of those guys that is extraordinary. He started out in Hollywood as a child actor and visited with such notables as Shirley Temple for her birthday parties and those things. But Pat was a public servant for 24 years in Cottage Grove and maybe a few years beyond that doing different things. But he's an extraordinary individual. I refer to him as Oregon's oldest Boy Scout. He's been involved in scouting forever. And I just wanted to make mention of Pat because I know we all know him and have worked with him over the years, and he had a great public servant's heart. Most of the time he was easy to work with. But,
I've not
anyway,
seen one of those.
so with that, I just wanted to give a shout out to Pat.
Thank you. Any further announcements? If not, I've just got a couple quick ones. One, I will not be at the Homes for Good board meeting tomorrow because I have to be in Salem for a Criminal Justice Commission Grant Review Committee meeting as we are looking at 4 counties that are looking to continue their grants through the biennium on the Justice Reinvestment Act. And I also wanted to make note that they scheduled with the revisions in the 2018 legislation to the Cleaner Air Oregon rules that were coming in. They scheduled a Rules Advisory Committee meeting, but they scheduled it during our Budget Committee. So I tried to get my alternate to go, which is Kelly Minty Morris from Klamath County, and she can't attend either. So I specifically told the folks from DEQ that to not schedule that meeting in May, to please wait till June, and they refused to push it back even a month to try and elect local government officials because that's a horrible time of year for local government officials. So just so you know, they're going ahead with the meeting and they're not going to have local government representation, at least from the Association of Oregon Counties present. The other thing, Commissioner Farr and I got to get a sneak preview of the point-in-time count yesterday when we can't talk about numbers till it's been officially approved because that's not legal. Our lips are, but the one number I probably can talk about without breaking the rules is the fact that they got twice as many volunteers doing the count this year as they had last year.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which is just an awesome thing. And I just want to commend our human services staff and all of the agencies they work with on achieving that.
300 volunteers.
Yeah, which is just an amazing thing. So hopefully we have a much more accurate count this year because we had so many more people out there trying to find and accurately count, making that point in time count. That's just how many people were homeless at that point in time. And the final thing I want to mention is if you're hungry this evening, get out to Division Avenue there and River Road, Santa Clara. Wayback Burgers is contributing 15% of all their proceeds to the River Road Santa Clara Volunteer Library. If you go out there and eat between 4 and 8, you don't need a coupon or anything. So great burgers, supporting a great volunteer library. That's all the announcements I have. Commissioner Sorensen.
I just was going to mention regarding the potential of a metropolitan parks area that when Lane County Circuit Judge Fort envisioned the Willamette Lane Park and Recreation District, the idea was to link the Willamette River and the surrounding land in Lane County to have a parks district for the metropolitan area. So it is interesting that because it was only initially, the initial land base was Springfield, that it has become a Springfield-oriented district, even though its authority is quite broad and could be bigger. So it'd be interesting if we go to a more of a regional approach to funding local parks. Obviously, Springfield gets most of its recreation and parks from the Willamette Lane Park District. Eugene gets most of it by the willingness of property taxpayers to pay the increasing levies and bonds that the city council refers to people and people vote for. So there's a pretty vibrant park and recreation program there. But outside of Eugene and Springfield, not so much, and particularly areas that are being encroached upon by expanding cities, whether on the north side, west side with Eugene, you see underserved areas. And so, I guess more power to them, but there's a lot of history here that has to be reconciled. I won't say untangled, I'll just say reconciled.
Thank you.
Thank you. So no other announcements from the commissioners, then we'll look at agenda team request or work session request. Any requests? Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So several weeks ago, Mayor Lundberg and Vin Lanana got together and started talking about what an indoor track may look like. And so yesterday morning, there was a first meeting of what's called they don't want to call it the Springfield Indoor Track, but instead it's kind of a community indoor track committee. And so Mayor Lundberg invited me, and they are focusing on Glenwood. They've identified some different sites. And so what I'd like to do is get head nods from the board, because one of the sites identified is actually county-owned property. And so I think it would make sense. And by the way, Gina will be the gatekeeper. And so I'd like to get head nods to make sure that we can have staff engaged in the process. Where it's going to go, I don't know, but I will tell you that Travelling County was represented, the city, the Springfield Chamber, Tracktown, U of O. Obviously, I was there representing the county. And I'm trying to think who else. There was an architect that was there as well. And so it really is. It was a pretty serious committee and just having a discussion. But there's some sites identified, and one, again, is county-owned property. So I think it would make sense so we can get staff to be engaged in this, to see what it looks like. I don't know if the county-owned property is real serious, but it's there. And I think that we should make sure that we have staff engaged in this process.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm seeing more than 3 head nods.
Okay, right.
So,
We'll do.
You know, we have the old Milrose Games track is here in town.
Yeah.
In storage.
I know. Yep.
Yep. So any other agenda team request or work session request? Seeing none, we don't have executive session. Any other business this morning before we recess for lunch? If not, we will recess for lunch and reconvene at 1:30 here in Harris Hall.